Today is Earth Overshoot Day. Can you please explain what that means? Also, it has come a day earlier than last year. Should we be worried? That's two questions in one. Let's start with you. I don't know. Who wants to take this?
So what's Earth Overshoot Day? It's a very simple concept. From January 1st until today, in just 7 months, humanity has used as much from nature as the planet is able to renew in the entire year. For the rest of the year, the next 5 months, we live off depletion. And that's possible because natural capital can be depleted. But that means the debt accumulates, the ecological debt that accumulates, and it makes our planet less livable, less able to provide for what we need.
We are now in deficit. You said we've used up all our resources in 7 months. How are we going to survive in the next 5 months?
We've been doing this, going into overshoot for almost 50 years, for more than 50 years, and we are still alive. So Earth has an enormous amount of biocapacity available, so we can live from depletion. But the big issue, of course, is that the consequences of depletion are now getting more and more clear, and with climate change, with loss of biodiversity. So at the end, overshoot is not sustainable.
You know, it's a cumulative process. It's not just how much we consumed last year. It's the accumulation of all the overspending in the last decades that makes the tightness ever more present. So overshoot will end. Like with money, you cannot spend more than you earn forever. It will end. The question is how. Do we make choices about it? Do we use design? Or do we just let nature choose for us, which would be less comfortable?
Can you, elaborate on the actionable steps we can adopt to reduce our ecological footprint? What's ecological footprint, by the way?
Yeah, ecological footprint is basically sort of the land that you need to provide you with all the goods and services that you use, and also the land that is needed to absorb all the CO2 emissions that we put into the atmosphere. So at the end, your footprint is really sort of the amount of land that you need to fulfill your needs. And of course, there are things to reduce your footprint and to be in line with the capacity of our planet. I think the most important one in this whole concept is your CO2 footprint. Because if you look at your ecological footprint, roughly 60% is from CO2 emissions. So if we move to renewable energy, solar energy, wind energy, together with storage from batteries, and we get rid of fossil fuels, that is an enormous change. A second one is food, because also here we can choose between food which takes a lot of energy and which takes a lot of land, or switch to more plant-based diets, which have a lot lower footprint. And then there are 3 others, because power of possibility is 5 things. So one is the earth, the soil, make sure that our planet restores and plant trees. Second one is cities. So if we design cities in such a way that we can reduce our mobility, that we insulate homes in the right way, then energy and food, which I talked about. And the 5th one, that's really a one for Mathis, which is population.
Yeah, that's someone, who is working in the population field. I'm quite interested in really knowing more about this because, population growth is a factor in our ecological deficit, and it's a sensitive topic, So how does Global Footprint Network approach the population conversation in a way that fosters positive change?
On the carbon side, we could probably make faster changes. We can decarbonize fast if we really want to. Populations move a little bit slower but steady, so it's a cumulative process. Even from a carbon perspective, probably because the population numbers, they don't shift that much. That will not make such a big difference in the short run. But in the long run, it's a huge difference whether we would move to 11 billion people in 2100 or 4 billion people. Because by that time, most likely we won't have the ability to use fossil fuels. So there's less input and there's more people sharing the bounty. So probably a smaller population will have a much bigger chance to have good lives in the future. The main thing to emphasize is the short-term benefits by investing in women, which is the most effective way to reduce population size. There's so many co-benefits immediately, obviously. Like women can have fuller lives, they can participate more in public life, in economically, in education. Families get healthier. So there's only upsides.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree with you on that. That is, one of the solutions that we talk so much about, at Population Matters. And even Project Drawdown, it's one of the solutions they put up, as a mitigating factor to the climate crisis, educating the girls and women, investing in family planning. This is the only way we can reduce, population growth. And it's growing. Of course, the UN released their recent projections and they said we are going to peak, but still we are going to add 2 billion people. Are we ready to add another 2 billion people to the current 8 billion?
Now we're already using 50%, 70% more than what Earth can renew, and then adding more people, and they need more physical amenities. So it also, there's so many people, particularly now with climate change, for example, there's so many places that are underserved physically, materially.
Yeah.
How can you live in a place that has like 50 centigrades heat, or even 40, or like even 35?
Looking ahead, are there any promising trends at all or innovations that could significantly reduce humanity's ecological footprint?
The change that even surprises me the most is the growth of solar energy. 10 years ago, it was still a new thing, an innovation. And nowadays, when I look around all houses in at least the Netherlands, not all, but already a quarter of them have solar panels on their roof. In China, they will install this year more solar energy than was installed in the entire history of mankind in the world. And prices are dropping, so solar becomes the cheapest way of energy.
And one super technology that already actually precedes the car, maybe it's not that innovative from that perspective, but still requires a lot of innovation, is pedal power. So it's not just the bicycles themselves, of course it is, but the infrastructure around it, how to organize cities that they operate well. Utrecht, where Joost lives, I think has the world's largest bicycle garage just at the train station. And people still complain, Utrecht, it's too small. Don't you think about the future? but it's that's where we need to go. Or like in the Netherlands, for example, the bicycle path, they are weather sensitive. So if it rains, the light turns green for bicycles more quickly, for example. So that makes it more attractive for bicycles as well. So it's a whole infrastructure. Back in the 50s, I think, there were still in European towns 10 times more bicycles than cars, and we've lost that advantage, but we're regaining it. I think it's good for health and good for the planet, and it's a lot of fun.
You have like any other, I don't know, regions or countries that demonstrate, the effective strategies for living within our ecological means?
I think for me, the litmus test, the litmus test really is that one. Are national governments, when they plan for their economic strategy, are they putting resource security at the center of their plan? If they don't, I don't see them prepared for the future. They're actually undermining their own ability to thrive. And that's the surprising part. So are countries really willing to commit to their own success? That's what I don't see enough.
And then individual actions. Personally, I've chosen to have a smaller family. I know it's highly effective. I try my best as well to, recycle. Minimally.
I think one of the most impactful individual actions is to get rid of one word in your vocabulary, which is should. Because as soon as you say should, it's not going to happen.
Okay. Tell me about that.
So ask yourself, what do you really want? Because if you really want it, if your desire is there, the likelihood of it to happen is much, much higher. So let's talk about what we want. Let's find out what solutions we really love. What responses do we love? What do we want to engage with? And that's going to have traction.
Fantastic. And then there's something called systemic change. The individual can do so much. You can only do so much.
That's why I think kind of where are the critical points. And I think that's why it's also about societal desire. Going back to if countries really say, wow, we need to be resource secure in the future, we can anticipate, because the likelihood of the future being with more climate change and less resources is incredibly high. And so why don't we prepare for that? So given that, what actually makes sense for cities and companies and countries to do to prepare themselves? And that's not just adaptation. It's not just kind of at the margin. It's really asking yourself, what does that future need? Because if you are able to provide for that, you'll be golden.
Many people really feel overwhelmed by the scale of the environmental challenges that we are currently facing, So do you have any message of hope as Global Footprint Network to offer in the context of Earth Overshoot Day?
Yeah, I want to acknowledge kind of that it feels sometimes too big. But again, I want to emphasize overshoot is our context. It's not the problem I personally can solve. You know, it's just it's the sea we swim in. You know, it's the water we swim in.
Yeah.
In that water we swim in. What are meaningful responses? How can you position yourself best, and your city and your family and your country, so it can actually work? And the good news is, it's kind of, we're now in the Olympic time. The Olympic time, one wins against the others. This is a totally different game around Overshoot. The win of one person becomes the win of the other people as well.
Lastly, do I see that date going back to December anytime soon?
Well, not next year, I'm afraid, but maybe in 50 years.
Oh,
Maybe sooner. Well, when these when renewable energy really kicks in, because that's a big chunk again, and that can be then that. And the idea is to have that to be on zero by 2050. So then we can definitely move the date in 20 years.
all right. I can't wait to see that happen, because it keeps getting
And also, if it doesn't move that way, then preparing yourself, your community, your city, and your country for that future becomes even more significant.
Yeah.
So it's actually, it doesn't depend so much on what others do. Actually, the less others do, the more you depend on yourself.
Fantastic. Wow, lovely. Thank you so much. This has been insightful. Yes,